right, everybody. We got another very special guest for you all this week. Everybody, please welcome to the show, Mr. Jon Westoff. Welcome, Jon. It's good to finally meet you. I've been seeing you around, and we finally got you on after trying reaching out to you. So it's really nice to finally get a chance to meet face to face because you got a lot of cool books that you work on that I would love to get some insight on. But I feel like since it's your first time, we got to start you in that spot. So let's get the background a little bit, your origin story, where you started, how you got to creating comics. Did you always have a love for comics? Those kinds of things.
I was fortunate enough to have a wonderful grandmother who worked at an office near a comic shop, and she used to read Betty Boop and comics like that. And she said, "Oh, I'll take my grandsons to the comic shop." And I remember the first or second visit there to Graham Cracker's Comics, picking up Amazing Spider-Man 332, where Venom's kind of jumping at you on the cover. And I was pretty much hooked from then. Thankfully, also had a mother who would, bring us with our allowance every couple weeks. And, back then with $5, you could get, 4 or 5 books. So that was great. So I've been pretty much collecting, like a lot of us, in and out at times. But started off, 90% Marvel comics. And then as I got in my late teen years, early 20s, branched out a little bit more. And I've kind of just always been a reader of comics. As far as creating, I really never had a desire to create. I would not consider myself the artistic one in the family. That was my brother. And he would buy the little blank sketchbooks and make his own stories and characters. And he was super into Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and had, all of his, Youngblood knockoff characters and X-Men knockoff characters. It was really him. He would, when we would, play action figures, he would make up the stories and everything. I was just happy to just kind of be there. It wasn't until I was in my mid-20s where I was in a band most of my life, from when I was about 14 years old to 30-something. And that period of my life started to kind of, started to wane down as I had children, and there wasn't as much time for, practicing 3-4 times a week and playing gigs. And it was kind of a natural end to that. And I still wanted to do something creative. And I was like, well, I'm on, back in the early social media days, there was these things called message boards where people of common interest would meet on these boards. And I was on a great one for the 11 O'Clock Comics podcast, and met some great people there. Just said, hey, anybody interested, any artists interested in drawing a silly story I come up with? And thankfully, my longtime collaborator and good friend, Bobgar Ornelas, he probably regrettably to himself answered that message and said, yeah, let's do it. So that was really how it started. I never had any like grand illusions of, writing for Marvel or anything like that. I was just like, I just need something creative to kind of fill the void. And then 15 years and like 4 dozen books later, I'm still doing it.
Just required an outlet to get it out of you, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, my buddies and I would make like homemade horror movies, and in the early days of YouTube, put like little shorts on YouTube. And I was always kind of creating, like I said, music or something. So it didn't feel like a huge step to kind of say, let's try and lay it out in comic form. And I've always loved the medium, and never really thought to myself, wait a minute, like I could do these kind of things. I think it's such a great medium for that, because the barrier to entry is low. If you know how to draw, you can make your own stories, or if you can find, a couple of people to collaborate with, you can just make comics, print them yourself, and you're off and running. You're a comic creator. So I figured, well, that's a pretty low barrier to entry. I can probably meet those requirements, and just been making them ever since.
In those early days of you creating comics or writing comics, what was the process of getting it out there? Because I see through your Kickstarter, you started, just had it up just a few years ago, possibly, unless you've changed Kickstarters over the time. But what was like those first ways of getting your books out there and getting them printed?
Well, I was actually one of the first creators to be on Kickstarter for part of that first couple of years, all the way back in 2010, I think was our first one. And I think Kickstarter started in 2007 or 8. So fortunately, from seeing other independent creators start on Kickstarter. I kind of jumped in on the early days, and we didn't do it all the time back then. Nowadays, I'm pretty much 100% Kickstarters, kind of the best way to get your books out. But my first foray was webcomics, because, in those days, the early aughts, a lot of people were putting stuff, on websites. I actually, again, on that great message board that I was a part of, there was someone who ran like his own kind of online magazine, and he offered, hey, we'll make your comic part of our, weekly segments. And so that was kind of how I started. And webcomics were really just kind of starting up around then, and there was quite a few that were catching traction. So we tried at the beginning to be like, digital only, and then see how it caught on, and then print them from there. So my first comic was straight to the web.
I remember the first person I ever met that was creating comics on his own. This is before we knew that people were doing it on Kickstarter, really. And he literally built his own website just to post this webcomic. So I remember those webcomic days in the early times. We didn't have all these sites that people have now to throw them up there and have a giant audience attached to them.
Yeah, in my second book, we created a site for it, and it's just, it's if it's not native to you, it's not as easy as it looks. So thankfully, I had some people to help me behind the scenes, but it eventually kind of became too much of a hassle to get, 3 clicks a month was not worth keeping it up.
Yes, that is tough. I want to go through some of the books I've seen in the books you've done in the past. The first one that pops up to me, and it's because for me, like, I love all types of comics. I love serious comics. I love Alan Moore. I love all the creators throughout the industry. But there's a soft spot in my heart for goofy, fun, silly comics. And when I look at the title Bulletproof Chicken, I think silly, fun action comics. So what is this book, and why hasn't it been in my purview before?
Well, it is one of our most popular all time. One of the first handful of books that I wrote. Of course, like any great story, it started as a joke between two friends.
Yep.
My again, longtime co-creator and now one of my best friends, Bob Ornelas. He and I were at C2E2, tabling, selling our wares, and we were kind of talking, I think, about how we were frustrated about we need something to get the people to pay attention to us, and we need to do like funny animals or something. And we were eating at Harold's Chicken Shack, which is a famous fried chicken place in Chicago, which, for better or worse, is often in areas that are not always deemed that safe. So they protect their employees by bulletproof glass. And Bob was joking while we were eating about how we were eating bulletproof chicken, and I said, well, then that's our next book. We're making bulletproof chicken, and that was how it really started. And then he, of course, drew a couple sketches of this amazing, foul detective fighting crime, and then he did the awesome, Contra homage logo, and we were just, it was just like an 8 or 10 page story to start. It just kind of happened almost immediately. Wrote the script, and I love stories like that. I love that era of TV and film and 80s and 90s. This was obviously a little bit more over the top even than that, because I think if you're going to go in, you got to go all in for something like that. And then after he did those first 10 pages, he wasn't able to finish the book. So we brought in another friend and artist, Matt Nixon, to finish it, and then we kind of just went all out. It started as like a Lethal Weapon inside joke, and then became RoboCop and all the other awesome of that era kind of homage.
How many issues of that did you end up doing?
We actually ended up doing 3 issues. We came back about a decade after the first one. It was one of the first books now for my second company venture in part-time comics. When I parted ways with Bob Gar, we used to publish together under the name Kingbone Press. Took a couple years off, and then decided I wanted to give one more go at it, and we brought Bulletproof Chicken back for kind of its final hurrah in 2023, I think was the last issue.
Interesting.
And it's a one and done story in the first, and then the second one was 2 prequels, 3 sequels. I won't spoil it for you, but we kind of did the whole gamut. And then the next, it's more of an anthology style, because we knew there was tons of cool stories we could tell in this. So it becomes kind of this cool anthology. There's some Elseworlds tales in there too. So we kind of really went did all we could with it so we could kind of stick a fork in that chicken and he would be done.
Yeah, there is something, and you see it more in British comics where there's that character, and we don't have to see a through line with them. Like, it's not Amazing Spider-Man where we have to watch him every day of his life through the comics. Where like something like Judge Dredd, you tell like a quick story, and then somebody else jumps in and moves in a different direction. I always had a like for that idea of doing something with characters like that, especially
And
something
Bob
as silly
is
as Bulletproof
he's
Chicken.
a huge 2000 AD fan. We both love Dark Horse Presents and those. Yeah, you don't have to. It doesn't have to be this long, winding philosophical tale about life. Right? It can just be what it is. The original script was really meant to be big panels, big action. It was very much inspired by Frank Miller and Jeff Darrow's Hard Boiled. So it was really meant to be that. And then I kind of realized, well, we have kind of a story here. So we kind of scaled that back a little, and it wasn't just, 30 pages of action shots and people jumping out windows. We were like, well, I think we actually might have something here. And I'm glad that we did, because again, it all time is definitely, it's such an easy sell at conventions. People are just like, oh my God, what's Bulletproof Chicken? And they see the, Bob's amazing covers, and they're just like, wow, yeah, I got to get this. So it's been a great book to have on the table for sure.
So you mentioned there a little bit, and I was reading a little bit about it, that you had that venture with your friend early on, and then it eventually rebranded. Was there just a cutting of ties there, or kind of what happened that made you leave for a few years and want to get out of comics and then get back in?
Well, really for me, Bob and I in Kingbone Press, we had tried to take on some of our friends' books and publish them. And for me, I kind of burned myself out a little bit. We weren't like, full time doing it or traveling to conventions all the time. It was just a lot of work behind the scenes to, maintain websites and run Kickstarters. And I felt like maybe we overextended a little bit. I don't think any of the people we were helping, publish were upset about it or felt like they didn't, get what they wanted out of it. I felt like I didn't. I felt like I wanted to, as a publisher, to help them make sales and to get their names out there or whatever their goals were. And it kind of left me a little bit burnt out, kind of taking on that responsibility. So in like 2018, we had a pretty lousy convention year, and there's a lot of cost to making comic books, so it was kind of putting strain on my relationships. Like, I'm sinking my extra funds into these comics, and it's started to become a financial burden on there was actually 3 of us running the company at the time, and it just felt like it was the natural end to it. We had done work together for about 10 years, but then about 2 years later, I kind of got the itch again to write, and I said, if I'm gonna jump back into it, Bob and I did not, we still talk almost every day. We did not leave on any ill terms, but I just knew it was probably better at this point, for it just to be under one person. It's really just now a way to self-publish stories that I'm working on, because I enjoy publishing other people. That's been, we did probably a dozen anthologies together, and it's always great when you get feedback from people. Oh my God, this is my first time in print, and this was so great. And the collaboration process, or teaming people up with artists for the first time, I still love that process. But in the end, you only have so many hours in the week to dedicate to this part-time, as I call the company now, Part-Time Comics. And I just had to understand that there may be a time for that again in the future, but for now, I'm really not able to give as much time as is needed to really help other people get their stories out there at this point in my career.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot just getting your Kickstarters done. I know from experience and just from knowing so many people do it, like, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, you can probably see I'm shipping 2 right behind me here, so they're all over my office right now.
So you come back, and you mentioned that you brought back Bulletproof Chicken. To kind of go back to that, did you hang on to most of those original works through the original publishing deal you had with this new one? And then are they being kind of reprinted as a Part-Time Comics book now?
So the only character that we brought over was Bulletproof Chicken, and that was with Bob's blessing. He's the co-creator of the book. He had no problem. He did a great cover for for the book. He wasn't able to. There is a story that he finished out, but it was actually something we published digital only. So he, of course, was okay with me reprinting that. So that's the only character we brought over. I'm sure my other co-creators would have no problem with, like I had a long-running series called Hellbillies and a long-running webcomic called World's Strongest Mailman. I'm sure Brian, my co-creator on that, would have no problem. I haven't yet started reprinting those. Some of that is, a little bit of, cringe of that being kind of your early work, and maybe you're not as proud of it as you are other things. But yeah, that's Bulletproof Chicken is the only one. I don't think anybody would have any problems with if I said, hey, we're going to reprint, how can we work it out? When you're kind of running your own business, it makes it a lot easier, right? You have a lot of close people you work with, you're able to kind of work it out.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I guess the next book I'd like to talk about, because it's the one that put you on my radar, because I see so many people talking about it, and I would have suspected this was your most popular book. But apparently Bulletproof Chicken is, which makes me very happy, which is Drumsticks of Doom.
And they are not related, despite the title of Drumsticks. I get that often.
I know this dives more into your music background. Seems to have like a metal edge to it. What's this book all about?
Yeah, so Drumsticks of Doom is, again, kind of having music be a part of my life for a long time. And I'm always fascinated by stories like Scott Pilgrim, which uses music, and there's a comic from Magnetic Press called Doom Boy, and there's another one called Moonhead and the Music Machines. These comics that make you feel sound on the page when there is no sound. I've always loved comics like that, and of course, loving music. I said, if I'm going to make a go at this a second time, I'm getting older, getting up there in years, I want to tell my music story. One of my favorite projects I ever worked on was an anthology called Banthology, which is where I met the artist of Drumsticks of Doom, Dan Doherty. Somebody else introduced us. Dan was in the book. We've had a friendship since then. And I've kind of had this vague idea of a music book in the back of my head for a while. And I finally approached Dan in like 2019. I said, hey, if you got time, I know you're a full-time artist, would you like to work on this book with me? We had been friends for, a decade at this point now. So he was like, yeah, tell me what it's about. And the short pitch was Black Sabbath, not the Beatles, became the most popular band in the world, and thus the universe was changed forever, musically and otherwise. Heavy metal rules the earth. And like other stories like Bulletproof Chicken, it kind of started as a kind of a silly over-the-top premise. Really, it was I was listening to heavy metal, and if you love heavy metal, there's some bands that are over the top, power metal, I would call it. I was listening to Manowar is the band. And I was like, what if Manowar lyrics were real? Like, all this stuff about fire and steel and thunder. So it really started as that. It was like a tribute to kind of, those kind of bands, like Ronnie James Dio's early lyrics and stuff like that. And then again, once I saw Dan's amazing pages and we started kind of hashing out the story, I was like, okay, we have something here. What's it really about? And what it's really about for me was part of it was that transition for myself, like coming out of being a musician. And I was never, I was never great. I was never going to be Neil Peart or anything like that. But when you kind of get to that transition in life, you start to think about that. Well, who am I now if I'm not a musician? Like if I leave this behind, who am I? Or if I don't like listen and go to heavy metal shows every week, am I a metalhead? You start questioning these things about your life. Like, who am I? So that's what the real story is about. But again, I didn't think people would read kind of a boring story like that. I'm not Jaime Hernandez. I can't write Love and Rockets. So I had to put werewolves and Frankensteins and kind of, cool stuff in there too. So Drumsticks of Doom is really a culmination of a lifetime of loving and creating music. And then what happens when it doesn't kind of go the way you think it might go when you're younger? How do you adjust to that?
That's very cool. Yeah, I love, you always have amazing covers for it. And I thought for me, I see it and I see a lot of people talking about it. I personally always think that music comics are tough. And they can so easily be done incorrectly, I guess is the nice way to put it, that I almost shy away from them to a point. Like I know a lot of creators at Image and so on have tried over the years, and I've tried a few, and I have a hard time with them. So I guess what I'm trying to ask you here is, how do you How do you bring that into the story and make it work in the comics medium?
Well, you mentioned, the great covers of Drumsticks of Doom. I cannot disagree with that. I think if I have a strength in comics, it's that I know how to pick the right artists for the projects. I think that you want to find artists and let them work within their strengths, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not that you don't want, as a creator, to step outside of your comfort zone, but when you see someone like Maria Wolf, who draws the most amazing, badass, heavy metal, with all her amazing hatching and lines, why wouldn't I want her to make a cover, with, a woman holding up, a guitar like an axe? Why wouldn't I want to do that? Like, that's cool as hell. And Dan is the same way. Part of the reason I brought Dan on the book, and I really wanted to work with him, is Dan is a lifelong musician. He still plays to this day. In fact, I just saw his band play a couple weeks ago. So that was very important to me because Dan knows that side. It's not just that he, obviously his artistic technical skill is second to none. He can draw anything, including the musical equipment, understand how it's set up, understand how a guitar player plays, holds the guitar when they're playing, all that stuff. But he also knows what it's like to be a musician. And when we worked on that anthology I mentioned called Banthology, Dan's first story was a story called The Beast in Me. And it was about himself. It was, an autobio story. It was about the first time he played a big show at the Metro in Chicago. And that kind of beast gets in you, and it kind of says, every time show after that is just not as good, and you're always kind of chasing that dragon. It was only a 6-page story, and it was, it was just so well done. First off, his art. It was the first time I had seen his art meeting him. But that story always stuck with me, and I told Dan that, like, part of the reason I want to work with you is because you said something in this story that only people who've kind of done these things, maybe you could compare people who are like actors or something like that, who've kind of had that taste of that excitement of like live music, and you sometimes you don't ever get back there, or sometimes you work and try to find a way how you can. And I just love that story. We gave it out as a free digital add-on for the first issue of Drumsticks of Doom because that was a big part of what inspired the story. And again, I brought Dan in because I think he can capture that music, and it's very difficult. You have to, sometimes you have to give into the nature of comics. Comics are cartoony, and you can do things that are strange and wonderful and do whatever you want. But you have to walk that fine line between kind of making it corny and making it like believable. And Dan just has a way to kind of draw on the page and make sound kind of appear on the page, from his line work. And I just, again, if you've read the book, I think at least the art portion of the book, you're going to get an amazing story from Dan, and I think he can handle all that needs to be on the page to make you kind of feel music when you can't hear it.
Yeah, and I think that's something important with books like that. And there's other examples of this in different genres, but for the artist to handle the sound effects and the feel of the sound in the book would be very important, because it has to flow with his art along with everything else. So I could see that working with him doing all that. Yeah,
and it is still kind of Lana, our main character. It is also part of a coming of age or a coming of musical careership for her. So that's part of the story too. And like I said, there's werewolves and Frankenstein, so it's fun. We try not to overdo. There is, a part of the story has to do with music and how it, brings power. But we also, try to not overdo that as well, so that when those moments hit, they feel kind of special in the book too.
Definitely. And before we get in, because you are here to talk about stuff you have coming out right now or very soon, but there was one other book that has always caught my eye when I see you around, that this one hits a little bit closer to home, and I think would hit closer to home with everybody out there. That's LCS, which is you describe as a post-apocalyptic comic about comic collecting. How did this book come about, and where did the germ for this idea come from?
So the germ for the idea came from, I like most people love post-apocalyptic fiction, 28 Days Later and Walking Dead and The Road and all these amazing stories. I Am Legend. It's just fascinating, right? To think about what would the world look like if the world suddenly wasn't the world we know and all that. So really it was, okay, I would like to dip my toes into that era of fiction and write what I think it would look like. And I didn't really have an in, right? Because that's very intimidating. I'm not Matheson and I'm not Cormac McCarthy. Like, what can I say about how human beings would handle the fall of civilization better than these, amazing world-winning authors? I just could not find my in it. That where's something that, speaks from Westhoff and his point of view. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, everybody thinks, okay, the world ends and next week I'm going to be out, trying to save my grandmother from her house, and I'm going to be out finding the cure to what's going on. Honestly, I think most of us would ride it out, and then we'd probably be like, hey, I never did get that Funko Pop I really wanted. I better go down to the comic shop and see if anybody hasn't rated it. So it was really, again, kind of just a half-assed joke. And I was like, well, wait a minute. What if you were running the LCS, the last comic shop, instead of the local comic shop? What would that look like? And that's kind of where the story started. And I said, okay, now I have something that I can actually build with. And bringing in artist Winston Gambro really helped bring that story to life. So it really started as just that kind of that germ of what realistically would people be doing if the world had ended and there wasn't really anything to do. You'd probably be trying to find Spider-Man #1 and all those things, that you never got to collect before whenever all these 9 billion people were in your way.
Yeah, it makes me think, because I'm currently, while everybody's watching the Last of Us TV show, I'm currently playing the Last of Us Part 2 video game because my brain's broken. I can't watch the show until I've played the game. And one of the little nuggets throughout that game is that the main character Ellie, especially when you do the flashbacks as a kid, is in love with this science fiction comic. So when you go somewhere, or there'll be moments where her and the main character Joel will talk about oh, I found some of these comics you like throughout it. And I'm like, yeah, of course. You're living your life, but at the same time, you're living your life. You're still going to find some escapism from this horror world that you find yourself in.
Now, I was bad. I've heard amazing things about the game and had not had the time to play it. But I am caught up on the show, and that is funny because, yeah, I do like that part of the show, too. When she, finds the old posters or plays guitar and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I remember seeing it and thinking, this sounds like a really cool, fun idea. I like, you just did a 2-issue series, so it's something quick and tell a fun little story. Like you said, not everything has to be this grand adventure, this super insular thing.
And for LCS, there is a bigger story there. There's a twist to why certain survivors have survived in there, and I hope people like that. Winston and I would like to tell a bigger story, but we're realistic. It took a year between 2 issues, and we wanted to tell a pilot episode, so to speak. And then if there's a demand there or something comes of it, we could definitely return to that world. There is a bigger story. I think we could tell, tons of stories in a world like that that I think would be fun. And I think Winston has helped create great, memorable characters, which I think is important more than the scenery around it. But yeah, we definitely would love to go. That did just finish, like you said, with the second issue. It was a successful Kickstarter this past March. So we were very happy to get that funded again. And it's actually part of what I'm shipping out behind me. So I'm very excited to see what people think. And again, if there's enough, demand and excitement, or, maybe a publisher approaches us. Yeah, I think Winston and I have lots more stories to tell in a world like that.
Yeah, and I know Winston, a guy that we've had in the show in the past, is somebody working on his own work as well. So I'm sure, doing this, and then he's also working on things on the side as well. The man's constantly making comics.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough he could slow down and fit those in because, yeah, he's a busy guy.
Yeah, and he does great work. So especially for something so, one of the things that caught me about it was how colorful your post-apocalyptic world was. You really shied away from the browns and blacks, and you have almost a purple and green tilt to everything in there, which I'm sure has a lot to do with the with Winston's coloring. I know he does a lot of that in his books.
Yep, he is amazing. Everything I've read from him is great. That was the number one reason I wanted to work with Winston. It wasn't. He did a short mini comic called The Envelope. And again, he's just able to adapt. Every book is a different style, a different color scheme, a different artistic approach. He's just so adaptable. I will give full credit to him. There is not a single word about the colors in the script. He was like, okay, he told me, hey, John, I was just dabbling with some colors. What do you think of this? And I was like, you nailed it. Like, this looks
Yeah.
like a radioactive, like, it looks unique, so it's like memorable. So no credit to me. Winston was 100%. He took the lead on that and was like, yeah, I got the right palette. And it's so important to the book now. It wouldn't be the same without his influence on it.
Yeah, it stands out amongst all the other post-apocalyptic books you see, and media in general that you see, because it's always drib and drab and dreary, and this has a little bit more hope to it just through the coloring, which is and fun to it as well.
Yeah, and that's definitely what we're hoping for. I kind of always lean towards, there's serious moments in it. But I'm naturally kind of a more comedic writer. Maybe I kind of hide behind it, by like a lot of people. But I try to put some heart and humor into every book, because again, I do love that kind of fiction. Like I said, I've been able to listen to the Road audiobook and watch the movie a few times. I'll probably never watch it again, even though I love it because it's so depressing. But I'll leave that up to other authors because I can't get that low. Maybe that's because I'm a social worker by day. I don't want to be that heavy and negative all the time.
I can feel that. So let's get to what you have coming out. And I think the best place to start is the one that you're going to be launching soon. So we can give people a little look into that book, and then we'll talk about the one that's on Kickstarter right now. And that book is Child Possession Services. And you're about to launch the final issue, or at least the final issue of this storyline. So I guess, what's the quick pitch for that book?
The quick pitch is, what if there was a rise around the world in possessions? Of course, the government would put a poorly run and underfunded agency in charge to help these kids that are dealing with or are currently possessed, and that's where Child Possession Services comes in, starring our main character, Connie Dar, who, like many of us, is a burnt-out social worker for kids who are currently or recently possessed.
So I'm guessing this one has a little bit more of yourself in the story.
For sure. Like I said, Drumsticks of Doom is kind of, what my musical journey. This one is, as a social worker, there's a lot of like inside baseball that I could tell people about being in that profession, and its ups and downs. But again, I didn't think people would necessarily read a book about that. So I was like, oh, what if the kids were possessed? I've wondered sometimes if the children I work with are possessed, but that has not been confirmed yet. But I was like, you know what? That's just, once I got the title of it, I was like, okay. My again, to mention him, my longtime co-collaborator, Bob Ornelas, he needed a short for an anthology he was doing. And I was like, well, I kind of have the seed of an idea. At first, Connie was just a spoof on John Constantine, because Bob loves John Constantine. I do too, but he's a huge fan. And that's, her original name was Constantina, as a joke to him. I, again, thought it would be a one-off story, but once Bob drew the art and we started talking about the character, and he put a lot into it, and I had a lot of experience in working with women in the field that I'm in, and so there's a lot of real world examples in there. Connie just became this bigger, fuller character and a story there. And then, so she started out in that anthology, and now, like you said, in September, we'll have our 4th issue and final issue. I'll be honest, there was a bigger story to tell with Connie, but again, the world is what it is. Economy is what it is. Comics are what they are. We decided to kind of wrap up her first act here and then kind of see where it can go. I think there's more stories in that world as well. But for Connie's kind of first chapter here, we thought it'd be a good time to give people, the end of that arc. It'd be a nice full story in a trade. So that's part of how Connie's kind of end journey has come in September of 2025.
Well, and do you feel that, especially with Kickstarter, but I think this goes for a lot of indie comics, unless you're Robert Kirkman or Brian K. Vaughan or somebody, that doing like a mini series and then maybe doing Child Protective Service 2 Electric Boogaloo for the next one, or whatever you want to call it, is a better way of telling that overarching story and keeping people engaged?
I think so. I've recommended to many of my peers who I had a lot of people help me when I was first starting out, so I like to do the same. And I do try to tell them that. Don't necessarily, if you're a Kickstarter creator, you don't really have a publishing deal, you're not doing this full time, you probably don't want to go into your 60, 75 issue epic right away, because you'll leave your readers feeling with an incomplete story. Try to do an arc, try to do a single one-shot issue first, see where that goes, even a short story. Start with those things first, And that was, again, I tried to, like Drumsticks of Doom, I kind of knew it was 3 arcs, and I told Dan to begin with that, so we kind of knew at the beginning that there was a bigger story there. We had some stops and starts and artist changes with CPS, so there's that one was a little different. I did hope for a little bit longer, but I still think it's a good story. And you kind of got to know. You got to know yourself, right? I've already been working on CPS for this. This will be the 5th year. So, read the writing on the wall, right? If you can tell a good story in 4 issues and not, again, leave it hanging in the middle and never finished, I'd rather do that than hope for that, longer series and never really get there,
Yeah, I feel you there. And so, I mean, how many times have we heard about over the years at even a big 2 publisher or an Image or something where a book gets canceled or is told like, hey, wrap it up at issue 6. It's like, yeah, we're done here.
Yeah. Oh, it happens all the time in different comics. It's not just us in indie. So I definitely don't want to say that. But I do often see, and this is no ill will towards anything, but it happens with independent publishers way more often. Again, we used to see it if you've come up through the heydays of like Image and stuff. It happened all the time. Yeah. But nowadays it's really, us self-publishers that are, excited to put out 1 or 2 issues and not maybe realizing what it takes or not listening, to our peers and taking that leap, and then, issue 2 maybe it never comes out, or 3, and I'd rather have a complete story, and those are good for us indie creators to have, a full trade on the table. It's a complete story. The person buying it knows, if they come back in the future and find one, great. If not, they'll get, a full feeling out of reading it. I think that's important.
Yeah, definitely. And there's no reason you can't come back to it down the line too, if it builds steam, or you just have to get that itch out of your brain, or whatever the impetus for another story is in there.
For sure.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess that's a good way to kind of move over to your one shot that you're doing right now on Kickstarter. It is currently trying to get funded with, well, as this releases, 2 weeks left to go, and that is Final Heist. So quick for me, because I know we've just met, but I love crime and noir comics. So when you sent me this as like, this is what we're doing right now, and it fell almost as a surprise release to you, I was excited because it gave me some crime noir stuff to read about and check out and everything. So I guess, where did this book come from, and what are you telling in this one shot?
So for this one, this was kind of an idea, a seed of an idea that I had for a couple of years. It's actually been working behind the scenes for quite a while now. I brought on co-writer Aaron Dowen. He's an editor by trade. I asked if he wanted to edit the script. He kind of read through it. He was like, I really like this, and we were talking about it. It just seemed like he really wanted to jump into the project, so I was happy to team up with him and make it kind of a fuller story. We kind of knew from the jump that this was very much, how I pitched it to him was, a lot of these stories start with, a group of ex-cons gets back together for one last score. That's how a lot of crime things. But I said, well, what if there was a twist to it? What if there was more to what they were going in to get? We hadn't seen a lot of, genre fiction like that. And Aaron was just, he was all in on it. And that was really how it started. We had another artist intended to draw it. They dropped out, so we've had some stops and starts. But we were so happy to bring in Deborah Lancinisi. Our story takes place in Italy. She's an artist out of Italy. We wanted someone who kind of knew the scenery and the locale, so she's going to take us to the world's oldest bank, which is where this heist will take place. So you could imagine there's probably more to it behind those walls than just money. But yeah, that was how it started. It was kind of just a seed of an idea. And Aaron, and I have been, we co-wrote the script about 2 years ago, and then we've been just waiting for the time to kind of launch it and get it out into the world.
Yeah, it sounds like a cool idea, and I just have to ask, because in 2 of the covers, I see some tentacles going on. On a scale of 1 to 10, like, how hentai are we getting here?
Not hentai, but there's definitely a clue there, so I'm glad you were paying attention. We are trying to give people a clue without giving it away of what might be lurking behind the scenes there. But yeah, and that was part of what I wanted to do. Again, you may have seen a theme here. A lot of these books start with kind of a half-hearted joke, and then you kind of realize, well, there's more to the seed. We can grow it. And this one's really, it's a love letter to 80s and 90s action crime movies. But, with a twist. We're doing a little bit of genre mashing, a little bit of horror, a little bit of romance, a little bit of, again, taking kind of some of those tropes and hopefully twisting them just enough that people will enjoy the difference that it kind of makes when they all blend together.
Yeah, and joking aside, I don't expect you to answer this because you said it as a hint, but I get a Lovecraftian feel to the story, is what the tentacles really said to me. But we'll see when I actually get to read it. So
we'll see.
It's you said
and sometimes hopefully we're not being too vague for people. We want to leave some surprises. It is a one shot, so I felt like if we and Aaron and I have struggled about that. He's like, well, how much should we say? And I'm like, well, let's have them crack the pages, and then hopefully people will read it and share it with their friends and talk about it. But there is some big twists and turns in this story for sure.
That's always interesting to me because for the indie creators, the guys on Kickstarter, the guys with like early on in their career or something, you all stay very vague, and I understand, and you should. And then we'll interview somebody who's doing like a big time Marvel image book or whatever, and they'll spoil the whole first issue, like right in the interview. And I'm like, well, I guess when you're writing, like when you have Marvel on the cover, you can do that, but
yeah, right. And that again, maybe I'm too vague at times. People tell me that I am. I don't give enough description in the Kickstarter. Again, I like cracking something open or turning on a movie and being surprised. I avoid trailers these days because they often give away the big moments, and that's kind of a downer for me. Part of it is experiencing it for the first time.
Yeah, I always say too, there's like creators out there who I don't even need to know. Like, I need to know what the book's called and that they're writing and or drawing it, and I'm picking it up. Like, I don't need any description. I don't need to get the behind the scenes of what's happening. Just when's it coming out? When's it on the shelf? I'll read it because I can trust that creator, and it adds that surprise element to it for me where I can just, like you said, crack it open and figure out what's in that book.
Oh, I definitely have tons of creators like that. Now, again, I'm definitely not to that point, so maybe again I need to find the middle ground a little better. But this one, again, it was really important for me, including each cover is very different. It's very much Aaron, bringing him in. He's also a graphic designer by day. That was kind of an unintentional bonus for the book because he did 3 amazing logos for this book. So we decided, you know what? We were talking about what the genres were, and I was like, well, one's like 80s, like Saved by the Bell, love. The other's like action, and the other's like horror. And he was like, I got you. He nailed these. He's like, which logo do you want? And I was like, I want them all because they're all great. And we're going to make 3 different covers that all fit the logos. So the logos really came first. And then we paired up some artists that could make things in that style. And then in the back of the book, we want to give you a little bit, because a lot of people do buy the variant covers. That's a big thing in comics in general, right? Especially indie comics. But I feel like that's always kind of like an empty... I mean, yes, covers are great and people love to display them and collectability and trade them and sell them. But we're trying to give you at least some bonus content in the back of the book related to the cover. So, if the romance cover catches you, there'll be some extras, the action, the horror one. So this is kind of a unique thing that Aaron and I are doing is adding some bonus content, to give you a little bit more than just a cover if you decide to triple dip and get them all,
Yeah, and how did you end up hooking up with Aaron? Because I remember when I was going through the Kickstarter, that name jumped out in my head for some reason, and it's because of One Last Job. I backed that book. That's a great 2-issue series. If anyone's ever read it, how did you two end up coming together on this? I mean, I know you said he was an editor. Was it just that simple? Like he's been editing for you, and
he has actually never edited. We are in the common, circles and groups. We've met online. We've kind of been on shows together, interview podcasts. So Aaron and I have known each other, probably 5 or so years. As I got back into publishing, found him in a lot of, common circles. I actually did read One Last Job and did enjoy it. I will give a plug to Aaron. The 3rd and final issue is ready to go. Hopefully Aaron will be launching that soon. And part of it, I'm glad you mentioned, is because I told him, you should work on this book. I believe the original title was a joke at Aaron. It was like One Last Final Job or something, because I was teasing him about the title of his book, and I was like, mine's going to be called The Final Last Job Ever. And he was like, you're an asshole. Why are you making fun of me? I was like, no, I'm just joking, with you. But I do want you to edit my book. And then we ended up calling it, we found a better title in Final Heist, which still, sounds very similar, but I thought was a little tongue-in-cheek jab at Aaron there.
And I know you mentioned a little bit about it, but how have you found the co-writing experience as opposed to your normal sitting alone in a room, in a dark room, with your hood up, writing comics by yourself?
Right. I'm glad you mentioned that too, because honestly, I consider all of my co-creators, all the artists, whoever I've worked with, even color, they're co-creators on the book. Mm-hmm. But I very rarely have ever scripted with another person. I very much give my artists full reign. If they want to change something, talk it through, add another page, split panels up. I have no problem with that. I would love actually if a lot of my artists gave more input, but I've never really said, here's a script, you do a page, I do a page, let's share it. It was different. I'll be honest. I don't know why in 15 years I had never really sat down to do it. I think maybe once or twice, I had kind of a writer's room thing and was working on, some scripts with people. But I said, you know what, that was part of why I wanted Aaron to do it, because I was like, I want to have that experience. I want to co-write. You write one scene, I write one scene. You have input on a character. It was cool, and it definitely. I definitely think it elevated the book. There was areas where I was either stuck, or Aaron made a suggestion that really just, brought the characters more to light, and he saw it differently than I did. So it was a really important experience, and I would definitely recommend it to people. Don't sit in that dark room. Share your scripts with people. I know we kind of get precious. These are so precious. But this was a story that wasn't personal to me. I wanted, to make the best, awesome, 90s movie I could make. And I was very glad that Aaron came in to be my co-writer on it.
Do you see doing that more often in the future?
I don't, only because I would like to reach retirement soon and end this comics career. But no, for the foreseeable future, I would like to finish Drumsticks of Doom first. Next year, I think it's going to be all about finishing Drumsticks of Doom. I love all the projects. I'm very proud of all the projects I've worked on, but I'm starting to realize that I entered Dan into a long-term project of 10 or 12 issues, and I've kind of taken on a lot of extra work that has slowed down that process, and I'd like to see that reach its final arc and conclusion before I kind of commit to anything else. So maybe in like 2027, we'll come back. Maybe Aaron and we've talked about maybe making Final Heist part of like a series of one-shots that he and I work on together. So there could be an opportunity for that in the future.
Yeah, it'd be cool. And anything else do you want to tell people about Final Heist before we kind of wrap everything up?
Well, just that, I appreciate you bringing me on to talk about it. It's difficult to get the word out more than ever now. Social media and even mailing lists, go to spam mail. Everything's like totally crunched these days. So if it's something that interests you, check it out. We understand financially that not everyone can back, but if you can share it, a lot of people will tell me, well, why would I share it? I have 6 friends on Facebook. It all helps. Every share, every heart, every comment, you don't realize until you're kind of, in this world that it's very difficult to promote anything without sinking, 50% of the budget of your book into it. So for us small creators, it really, really does help. So if this is something even that moderately interests you, you want to tweet it out or say, hey, I have a friend who also likes this kind of stuff, that all really helps, and we really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, my little social media tangent, everybody, I've done it a few times, but to new listeners, the reason the algorithm shows you so much angry stuff is because that gets the most likes, the most comments and everything. Yeah. So if you use that energy and push it towards positivity, we could all have a better algorithm. It would be really nice.
It would be really nice. And then if you post anything with a link, you're just done for. They just hate you. They put you into algorithm hell. So we know, but it's part of the gig. It's we've had a lot of success on Kickstarter. We wouldn't be here without it. So I don't begrudge it at all. But yeah, certainly with new titles, it's very difficult. Most of our stuff, when it's a longer running book or you have, bigger name creators on it, you can kind of utilize that to get you where you need to be in a campaign. But this one, it's kind of limped out the gate because, it's a new title. It's a one shot. People don't know what they're committing to. We get that. But, take a risk. In 15 years and multiple dozens of projects, I've never failed to deliver on a project. I'm very proud of that. I know with crowdfunding, people can be hesitant, but I've never failed. Even if we've had to change artists, bring other people in to finish the book. I want to get that into people's hands. They paid for it. They put their hard-earned money down. I take that very seriously. And I'm very proud that we've had a streak. I think this is our 25th Kickstarter. We've done other, crowdfunding. So we've got a wealth of experience. So you will get a quality book. I am positive of that.
Yeah, and to everyone out there listening too, like you got this book. If you end up backing it, he has all the add-ons as well for the past books. So buy a whole bunch of new number ones if you've never heard of Jon's work before. Buy them all, check them out, see which one you like the most.
And nothing feels better than that. We often give like a discounted tier that's like all the part-time comics books, even some of the ones from the Kingbone Press days. Yep. And nothing feels better than that. It's like, wow, this person, just plunked down a ton of money and got everything at once. It's like, wow, that's always a good feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
We give discounts, we do bundle deals. Like he said, we have them as add-ons. You can get all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so definitely go check those out. But Jon, it's been such a pleasure meeting you here today, you taking your time to talk to me. If people out there wanted to follow you, where's the best place to send them? Which social media network do you waste the most time on these days?
I am one of the people who doesn't hate social media yet. I like social media. I like the interaction. I've met so many friends and collaborators there. So I'm on all of them all the time, it seems like. But on each of them, I'm Part-Time Comics with an X. That's the easiest way to find me. Linktree is probably the best place, /Part-Time Comics, because then you can choose. Do you want to be on our mailing list? Do you want to be on our Twitter? Do you want to be on our Instagram, Facebook? Whichever way you want to engage with us, it's all there on the Linktree.
And to all my listeners or viewers out there, you should know the drill by now. Down in the show notes below, I'll have the link to the Kickstarter, the link to Jon's Linktree, and then I have found, I believe, all of his social media handles, and they're down there as well. So if you're on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, etc., they're all down there for you to find him and follow his work further. Like I said, Jon, it's been an absolute pleasure, man, and I hope we can do this again in the future.
Thanks so much.